Hello, welcome to the May webinar. My name is Nefertiti, and I have the pleasure of serving as the community manager here at Screencastify. Today, we are going over how to provide excellent, actionable feedback that your students actually get something from. And I'm joined by the excellent ladies at Fry Technology, Amy Mayer and Jessica Powell, and I'll let them take it away.
Hey, Nev, thanks for having us join tonight. We're so excited to talk about feedback. So Jess, we were having we were sad that we weren't online earlier when we started having our feedback discussion this afternoon, but we're going to try to recreate it for you guys. So can you kind of remind me where we got started on that conversation?
Yeah, it is so crazy because you have the best authentic conversations and you're like, man, I wish I could capture that energy. But we were talking about how feedback is such a tedious process for teachers and how oftentimes it's not really a super effective, the way we've been doing it with a red pen or, on the documents after the students have turned it in, how that's not super helpful in guiding students as they're learning. So what would you say about feedback as far as, like what's a way to improve it or what's a way that you see it kind of being revolutionized?
So this was part of our conversation earlier, definitely. I realized I used to be an English teacher, but the strategies we're going to show you tonight really work for all subject areas. But I was an English teacher, and that left me thinking about feedback a lot because for me, as I taught junior and senior English for most of my teaching career, and the grading was just so onerous. I mean, I felt like it was just this weight on my shoulders all the time. And I see we have a French teacher in here. Same with upper level French, where you're having students really write, and you need to give this intensive feedback to them to increase their motivation and all that. When I started really getting thoughtful about my practices, I realized that the feedback, in my head, it was feedback. What I was really giving my students was a grade justification because of
Yeah.
the time I was doing the feedback. Did you ever experience that as a teacher, Jess?
Yeah, because as you know, I also taught language arts and I taught 7th and 8th grade writing. And you're right. The only time I really gave, a feedback where I took a lot of time to be meticulous about it was after they'd already turned in their assignment.
Right. And I mean, then we realize, I mean, if you get honest with yourself about what's going on, you realize unless kids are redoing that work, that feedback is, I mean, they're not looking at it. That
Right.
I watch kids all the time, they got that piece of paper in my classroom and they looked at it for about this long and they put it down. And a lot of times they even literally left it in my classroom or put it in the trash, or I saw them shove it down in a backpack or whatever. And I thought, that paper you just shoved in your backpack represents, I mean, 15 to 30 minutes of my life that I put into that. And if you teach 100 to 200 students, which most teachers tell me they do now, high school teachers, that is an incredible amount of your week that is being thrown in the trash.
Yes,
So,
and Anna Maria is talking about when, she's teaching language, and you taught French, right?
I did. I taught French for a couple of years.
Absolutely. So not only are you having to think about what you're going to say, you also got to make sure you say it in the perfect other language, right? I'm sure it'd be much easier just to say it.
Yeah, it would be much easier just to say it. And that's definitely what we're going to talk about tonight. And we're going to show you a really specific strategy for how you can use Screencastify to give meaningful feedback. And another thing about feedback that I got to thinking about lately, I did a podcast with Matt Weld, who does Teach Illinois. That podcast is coming out tomorrow, and you'll see that on our social media channels and Matt's social media channel for Teach Illinois. So we had this really great conversation last week about feedback, and he made me think about so many things. And one of those was, what's the difference between feedback and advice?
Right.
And he sent me this article, and I told you about it this afternoon, and you really liked it. So I'm going to say this to everybody before we move on to what is the process for this with Screencastify. So a student comes up to the teacher. It's the end of the year, and he says to his teacher, you've been writing this word on my paper all year. And I never have known what it meant. I guess I should ask before, but I never ask. So what does the word vagu mean? And the teacher says, vagu? What? Vagu? Can you spell that? VAGUE.
Oh.
I mean, is anybody, I just had that moment, of course, when I heard that vagu. So the teacher's feedback was a little vagu, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Well, what a waste, because all this time the student had absolutely no idea what to do to fix the process that she was going through to write, and the teacher obviously didn't realize that feedback was meaningless to that kid.
It was. And you know what it was? It wasn't feedback, it was advice.
Yeah.
And And there's a big difference, like, I think you should save more money. That would be a great financial plan for you. Well, you know what? If I knew how to do that, I'd already be doing it. That's
Right.
advice. And
Well, and Anna
advice
Maria
is,
just
go
Anne
ahead.
Maria says the same thing. She's like the oral feedback provides authentic pronunciation modeling. And so just like with reading, our kids are reading content or text that they don't understand and they're not getting anything out of it. And that's partially because they don't understand the words that they're looking at. So the same could be said for the things that you're writing. If your kids are struggling to read the things that you're giving them in class to read, they're definitely going to struggle to read the feedback that you write on their paper too.
Exactly, exactly. So, I mean, it all boils down to not wasting your time. Do not waste your time as a teacher. It's the most precious commodity you have. It's the thing you cannot get more of. And so you really have to be thoughtful. If you're spending several hours a week doing anything, you've
Yeah.
got to get critical thinking about how is this impacting learning? And if it's not impacting learning, you have to change your practice. Now you know something different. You got to rethink that.
Well,
So,
and can I say one more thing about that, Amy?
yeah, please.
So one of the things we talked about earlier that we got us all fired up was talking about differentiation and how, as teachers, the thing we hear all the time when we work with teachers is that they struggle to find ways to meaningfully differentiate activities and assignments for their students. And, as a teacher, I had the same kind of feelings. I just didn't really know exactly what I needed to do all the time to make things differentiated. They need to write. How do I differentiate the fact that they have to be able to meet certain TEKS? And that was always a challenge. But wouldn't you say that giving feedback to students, meaningful feedback along the way, would have actually done the thing I've been trying to do all this time? Differentiate the feedback for the students to help them where they are with the things they need help with.
Right. I mean, we're always thinking about how to differentiate assignments. And in our heads as teachers, I think to most of us, that means we're going to make a different assignment for a different student or group of students. But
Right.
differentiation can come at any part of the learning process. It doesn't have to, everybody doesn't have to have a separate assignment for you to be differentiating. We can differentiate with feedback. And anytime you're providing feedback to a specific student about their specific work and a specific problem,
Yeah.
then I mean, that's what teaching can be now in 2019 that it couldn't be 10 years ago because what are you going to do? I mean, you can't have writers conference every day or for
Right. 'Cause how do
Efren.
you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, for Efren's in our chat tonight and watching tonight, and he teaches chemistry, and I'm sure he would love to spend time with every single one of his students every day talking about their work and what the problems with it are and what they got right and all that. He can't do that every day in class because he has to supervise people in addition. So this solves so many of those problems. Yes, thanks, Anna Maria. Man, you guys are on fire tonight. Thank you so much for joining. So if you're okay with it, I'm going to screen share, and that means I'm not going to be able to see your chat anymore because I'm going to share my whole screen. And I want to show you what this looks like and walk you through the process of how to do this with Screencastify. And if you guys have questions or comments or anything like that, I want you to go ahead and put that in the chat anyway, because I know that Jessica and Neff are going to be looking at that chat while I'm sharing this process.
Yes.
So Jess, can you see my screen okay?
I can. I see the love bug.
Awesome. So this is a real student essay. I actually have added some errors into it so that I have more stuff to talk about in this essay. This is a student that I taught many years ago, and I did change his name, but I've used this essay literally 1,000 times to teach a session I call Beyond the Red Pen, where we talk about specifically English language arts. But I want to remind you, this strategy that I'm about to show you, it doesn't matter what's on the screen. I'm showing you an essay on the screen. This could be a picture that a student took with their cell phone and turned in via Google Classroom of a math problem they've worked.
Right.
It could be literally anything, because if it is on paper, and if paper's the best medium for it, then put it on paper. You don't have to use technology just because we all, love it and want to use it. If it's on paper, take a picture of it and put that on the screen, and then provide your feedback to whatever it is you're seeing on the screen that the student created.
That's
So
awesome.
it is, and Google Classroom, again, makes this, just incredibly easy. All right, so I'm going to give feedback to this, and our example tonight is an essay. So I'm going to open up Screencastify, And I like to teach teachers to use the desktop version of Screencastify. And the reason why is because you have the least thinking to do if you're recording the entire desktop. Browser tab is so cool when you want to switch back and forth and you don't want your viewer to see that switch. That's really neat. But that's kind of an advanced skill. And when you're just starting using screencasting, there's so many different things that have to be going on in your head. You're talking, you're moving your mouse, you're aware of this little recording happening up here. Maybe you're using the annotation tools that are going to appear in a moment if I turn that on. So I think that probably no matter what you're giving feedback on, you probably want to turn your drawing tools on. So I'm going to go ahead and fix my microphone. I think you can see how it's popping into the red, and you don't want it to pop into the red. When you do, that could cause discomfort for your listeners later on. So you want to make sure that you turn this down if it's going up too high. And I must be like really yelling tonight. Sorry, Jessica. I hope I'm not
Oh, you're doing okay.
yelling in your ear. All right, so let me turn that down. And now I'm going to go ahead and hit record. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk for a couple of seconds about this paper just to show you exactly what this would look like. I'm going to share my entire screen because I don't want to have to think about what's up here. If I want to switch to something else, I'll switch and I won't have to remember what it's recording. So I just heard and saw my 3, 2, 1. And now if I'm going to give feedback to this student, remember, it's not a final draft. It's still in progress, but it may be a second draft. So I'm going to say, hey, Manny, this is Miss Mayer, and I'm just going to give you some feedback on your paper. So first of all, I want to say that I love this title. It's something we talked about in class. We talked about having a double entendre or something that is interesting. And later on, we find out more information about it. And you really nailed it with this title. And I know that because I've read one of your previous drafts and I see you made that change. Now, before you do your final draft, I want you to go through. Don't forget to take a look at anything that is red underlined. And if you're looking at this in Google, then you can always right click it and see if that's the word that you mean. And in this case, I think you probably just haven't gotten to the stage where you're looking at this yet. Now, let's take a look at this. So I know you've heard me say this before, but I'm going to keep harping on it because I know you're going to college next year, and I don't want you to make this mistake and get a bunch of points taken off from your college English professor. So anytime you're using an exclamation point and you're doing formal writing, remember, it's only going to be 1. So what I would do is I would just go through this paper and I would just talk about anything that we'd been working on, anything I wanted to give feedback on. For example, when we did this writing, we were working on dialogue, and you can see how all you English teachers out there that he needs an enter right here. This is 2 different people speaking. So I wouldn't actually change it though. I would talk about it. I would give him the information that he needs to change it.
And that's really interesting because whenever I was guiding students and I would be working on something like this with them, sometimes I would make the change and then I would tell them later that I made a change. You know what I'm saying? Like if I was looking at their document, they'd have shared it with me, I might have made that enter for them and just been like, hey, don't forget to do that later, instead of having them do it. So
Right.
there's a lot of different tools as you're showing on the screen right now. That suggestion mode might even have been better. But I think a lot of teachers, just out of probably even habit, just kind of make some of these changes just to assist the kiddos. And really, we're taking away their opportunity for learning.
Yeah, that's so true. And it is hard to keep yourself from doing that. But if this is a learning opportunity, yeah, I don't want to, I always think of it as stealing the learning. Don't steal the learning from the children. And sometimes that means they're doing a lot more work than I am. And that's what should be happening. The learner should be doing more work than the teacher. So I just switched over to suggesting mode because of what you said just now, Jess, because that's such a great point. So if I do feel compelled to fix, quote fingers, fix something for Manny, then I'm going to turn on suggesting mode before I do that fix. So what I did just now is I switched from editing mode to suggesting mode. This is a very little known feature of Google Docs. It's going to turn your button green up here. And all I did just now is I just put my mouse there where I wanted to show the new paragraph, and I just hit the return key on my keyboard, because when I'm in suggesting mode, anything that I type automatically turns into a suggestion. And now let me say this is a number 1 misconception about this. Let me ask you, Jess, who is going to click accept suggestion or reject suggestion?
Manny is going to click accept or reject.
Exactly. So I don't want to do that because then he doesn't see this. But I want to ask you too, what is what is the potential issue if I transfer my process, but I go ahead and fix these things for him? What will Manny likely do when he gets this paper back and he's got all of these suggestions over here on the side?
Well, he's going to do the same thing that I do whenever people do that with me. I just accept all of them because I assume they probably know more than I do, and I just don't even think about why they gave me the feedback sometimes. And so he's never going to know why what he left in there was wrong. And
Exactly.
I'm thinking about something that who said it? I'll look at the comment real quick. Bernadine said that this would be great for peer-to-peer feedback, and really,
Yes.
really, this would be great for whenever. Just what she says, because with students, they often do the same thing that I was just saying I did sometimes. They just fix it for their friend instead of
Right.
showing them why they think it's wrong.
Exactly right.
And then I never know that Rich is the one who really made that change, and Rich actually didn't know why it needed to be changed either. He just did it. So by monitoring these videos, peer videos, maybe it would give me an opportunity to learn even more about my other learners who were peer editing for their pals.
Exactly, exactly. And I think a mistake sometimes novice teachers make is they don't realize that my peer editors need to be similarly skilled. And that
Yeah.
also does not matter. That's across the content areas. So I don't want to put my student who is, a C minus writer with my A plus student, because my C minus student knows that. And he or she is just going to go accept, accept, accept as fast as they can click.
Yeah.
And that's not effective. All right, so that's suggesting mode, and hopefully that's a new thing. And I want to show you, it just made me think of another thing just now. If you are a writing teacher or a language teacher, like our French teacher who's online tonight, and you want to have students do peer editing and you want them to use suggesting mode, it's a great strategy. What you're going to do is you're going to have them, when they give their peer editor access, they're going to give their peer editor can comment, and that's going to allow them to use suggesting mode, and it's going to allow them to highlight text and leave comments on the paper. But that's all they will be able to do. They will not be able to change the document.
Can
So,
you zoom into your screen at all in this mode? Because I know you're sharing your screen, but because when you showed the permissions, the text box was super small, and I don't know if everybody could see what you did.
sure. Let me go back to that because it is an important point for using this strategy.
There we
All
go.
right.
It's much clearer.
Okay, great. So I'm going to share this with my peer editor, Jessica at friedtechnology.com. And instead of giving her edit access, I'm going to give her can comment. And that is going to allow her to give me feedback without changing my paper.
Great.
And that's exactly what I want as a teacher. And if you want to see, if anyone has changed this paper, you can always go into File Version History, See Version History, if your file that you're working on is a Google Doc.
So really what you could have students do, I'm just thinking through this process. I could say, okay, Amy and Rich, you guys are going to work together, and I want you guys to share your documents with suggestion mode with your partners, and then I want you to use Screencastify to record as you give the feedback to your partner. So they're going to see in green the things that you're saying and suggesting, and then they're also going to hear you kind of rationalize or explain why they need to make that change.
Exactly.
So now I've got 2 assignments out of this activity, because now I have the students' writing assignment that they're working on, and then I also have the other students' revision exercise that I also could evaluate and kind of use that as a point of intervention.
Yeah, because it's really 2 very different skill sets.
Yes.
Editing and writing are very different skill sets. And at least where we live, those are 2 different tested skill sets. So yeah, very important to have students doing peer editing.
Awesome.
All right, so let's pretend that we have just given the feedback, and your feedback's probably never going to be 7 minutes and 40 seconds, but let's just pretend for demo purposes, it's probably going to be more like 3 minutes, honestly. Another thing I'll say while this video is coming up and we take a look at how we're going to share it and everything, is that this strategy with writing takes about 1/5 of the time of writing the same stuff on the paper. So
Yes.
when I first started doing this, I actually timed it, same paper, and I wanted to figure out how much time is this going to save me if I do this, because it seemed really hard at the time, and it saved me such a tremendous amount of time that I would have done it just for my own time, regardless. But then I tried it, and I gave papers back to my students that were videos. And the first time they didn't really say much. The second time they turned a paper in, or turned a draft in after I started this process, they came into class and said, "Miss Mayer, did you do that video thing with our papers again?" And I said, "Yeah, why are you asking about that?" And they were like, "Because that's so much better." And they all were getting out their earbuds and putting them in and trying to find a device to log in on so that they could listen to their feedback of their paper. And I think part of the reason why was because I was very careful to give some compliments in there. I started with a positive and ended with a positive, and tried to say anything I could think of in the meantime that was a positive, specific compliment to the student. And of course, everybody loves to hear what they did right and well, and they're willing to listen to some corrective feedback if they get that.
Well, yeah, and just like you mentioned, you're spending 15 minutes writing the critical feedback that needs to be addressed. You don't have energy or time to write all those little nice things, and so they never hear it. You're totally right.
That's so true. Yeah, that is a big mistake we make, but we're just trying to survive out there, so sometimes it's just about survival. All right, so let's pretend that this is our feedback to the paper, and now we are ready to get this back to the student.
Can I just point something out, because it was so subtle and we were talking? I don't know if you guys watching noticed, but she has two tabs open now. One is the document that she was working in, and now a second tab is opened up, and it's the Screencastify recording. And I didn't even notice it was a different screen, Amy, so that's why I'm pointing it out. And I was like, oh, we're all of a sudden on the feedback part. Okay.
Yes, good. I'm glad you said that. That's right. All right, so there's a lot of different ways we can proceed from here, but I'm going to show you how I teach this to people when we're face-to-face. What I have them do first of all is I have them click the default name. And I ask them, before they click anything else, just wait just a second, because what I would like you to do, instead of starting to type right now, which is going to type over this information, is I'd like you to just use the arrow key instead of typing over that. And now we're going to append the student's name and what this is. So I'm going to call it Manny Smith Personal Narrative. This is going to let me search Google Drive later on and find this more easily. And it also just is a good practice to name your videos, but it's also going to let me go back and take a little tour of Manny's work over time so that I can see, how has his writing changed and grown and all that. I could share this with parents or in an art, lots of different contexts for this. All right, so once I've named it, I'm going to click save. And now I'm going to go over to this symbol. Let me see if I can make it really big for you again, because we call this symbol up here corn dogs. It's kind of a long story, but anyway, you see it's circles, hot dogs on sticks. So that's what we call it, corn dogs. And corn dogs are for sharing. It gives me a teaching opportunity as a trainer to talk about that symbol meaning sharing. So now I'm going to put this on Google Drive. I'm going to check the privacy. People who have the link to the video can view it, and I'm going to copy the link. So now that link is sitting on my computer's invisible clipboard. All right, now I need to get this feedback back to Manny and only to Manny. So a lot of teachers, when I ask them this question, what do I do with the link now? They say, oh, just click the Google Classroom button. But that Google Classroom button is going to put that into Google Classroom for all my students to see, and that's not my intended audience for that. So I have a lot of different options. I like this one the best. The first way that I can get this to a student is I can just, whoops, let me go out of suggesting mode back to editing. I can just go into the paper and I can just right click and paste the URL into the paper. When I hit the enter key or the space key, it's going to turn into a hyperlink, and my student is going to be able to then click that, click the link, and go to the paper.
So that's like unavoidable. They can't go anywhere on their document and keep working without seeing the link. So that's pretty genius, actually.
Right, isn't it? And I actually taught this for years before a teacher said, hey, Amy, why don't you just do it this way? So I wish I could remember who told me that. I would give her credit right now. But so let's take this, though, one more level higher, because I know a lot of you guys who are watching this are probably pretty techie people, and that wasn't a new skill or strategy for you to paste a URL into a document. So let's make it look a little bit cleaner. So this time what we're going to do is we're going to hyperlink the title. So we're going to click, hold, and drag over the title of the paper. And now we're going to use our insert link button, or you can right click, either way you prefer. It's going to get you to the same place. And I'm going to hold down Control and press V now. Command V on a Mac, Control V on a Chromebook or a PC. And I'm going to apply that link to the title. Now, doesn't that look cleaner?
Yeah, it really does. So much nicer.
Yeah.
So we had a great question in the chat, and I think this would be a great time for you to kind of talk a little bit about it. So while you're using Screencastify to capture the video portion of this and to give a visual to the students who they can see and they can hear what you're saying,
Right.
can you talk about using Screencastify but also leaving typed comments so that students with hearing disabilities can still get meaningful feedback?
Oh, that's an awesome idea. Yes. So if I know that I'm working with a student with different abilities, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my practice a little bit. So if I'm going to talk about these 3 exclamation points right here, and I know that my student may have whatever kind of issues finding that later, then what I'm going to do is go ahead and leave a comment at the time. So maybe I might say exclamation points, or type some kind of a message over here to my student and leave that in the paper so that I can do that during the video. The student can see it in the video, and then as they open it up, they're able to click on the area with the highlight and have that comment pull forward.
Great. You know what else I was thinking about is that when you export, or not export, but when you're done with this video in Screencastify, you do have the option to put your video in YouTube. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And how
And
can you see that being used?
does YouTube also generate automatic subtitles?
Oh, what a great idea. Yes,
That's
yes.
good. I actually was going to say the same thing. The awesome thing about putting it into YouTube is not only does it generate subtitles, but I think it also supports over 50 different languages. So you can be speaking in English and YouTube will subtitle it in Spanish, which is also a pretty awesome thing for students to be able to access that. I also put something in the chat. If you wanted to add your own closed captions, you can do that in Google Drive. You can do it in YouTube. And then, of course, you can use that auto closed captioning feature, which is a pretty good way to make sure that things remain accessible.
Okay, can I just say that question, I learned so much in the last 10 seconds. So thank you guys for
I
for
agree.
asking that, Melissa.
Yes, that's a fantastic little extra thing there. So in YouTube, you can turn on automatic closed captioning for all of your videos. And then you can make this video private on YouTube or unlisted. And then you just send the link to the student who needs it, and it wouldn't be searchable or visible on YouTube. That's a fantastic idea.
Right, and just Melissa pointed out, YouTube is, you do have to be very careful when you speak, because it's a robot reading your voice, and it's a robot turning it into text for you. And so you just want to make sure you say things clearly, and things like idioms get mistranslated and things like that. So just be careful when you're sending that information to students so that you don't have any sort of embarrassing situation on your hands.
Yeah, good point. Definitely want to be careful when the robots are reading your stuff.
Yes.
So do you guys have any questions about the technical practices of this, or anything that we've talked about tonight, or just anything else that you're thinking that we should dive into?
While we're waiting for those classes, I was reading a comment. Those comments, I just want to point something out. We were talking, you mentioned Efren using this with his chemistry students, but I actually saw in a classroom in Cy-Fair ISD, a math teacher using a similar practice. I think he was using Screencastify at the time, but what he had the students do was take a screenshot of a math problem, and then they had to talk through the answer to the math problem, and they used the annotation tools in Screencastify to draw, how to carry the numbers and all that stuff. But what it ended up getting at the end of the day was 25 problems explained by 25 kids, and then he had a review sheet that all students had opportunity to take a look at. So he checked every student's video to make sure it was correctly solved, and then he sent that document out to the whole class, and that was all of their study guide for the next little activity.
Ah, what a great idea. So you could even make a Google form and have students submit a link, or have them submit a link through Google Classroom, and kind of curate everything that way too. That's a fantastic idea. I love it when kids teach other kids too. I think students really respond. We all respond well to learning from other learners. It's why it's fun for teachers to learn from other teachers. So what a great strategy. Neff, you joined. I'm waiting for you to say something profound.
I don't know if I have anything profound, but I absolutely love when math teachers show a whiteboarding app or something of that nature when you want to go a little bit beyond the annotation tools of Screencastify. And it gets even cooler when the entire class is on a whiteboarding app together and they get the opportunity to kind of screencast and go through that. And just as Jessica said, it creates this interactive study guide that we could have never hoped to have created as teachers, but the students become the curators of all of this amazing content. So definitely something that goes far beyond the English classroom, which is pretty awesome.
Does Screencastify work over Jamboard?
It actually does. We have seen some pretty cool app smashes of Jamboard with Flipgrid and Screencastify. It looks like Efren has tried that on his own. So yes, Jamboard is a go with Screencastify.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So we're really excited about Jamboard around here, and just in case you guys don't know what that tool is, so Jamboard is it could be a hardware product, and that's used more on the business side. But in education, Jamboard is a core Google app now. So if your school district or school has G Suite for Education, then if your sysadmin turns it on and allows it to be accessible, it is a collaborative whiteboard that would be able to be walled inside your district, protected like your other Google files are. And it has some really cool features, especially if it is installed as an app on a Chromebook from the Google Play Store. So as an Android app on a Chromebook from the Google Play Store, it includes AutoDraw. And if you don't know what AutoDraw is, when we get off this webinar, not yet, but in a minute, you should Google that and try it out. But not yet, because Neff has another resource to share with you before we go.
Yeah. AutoDraw is awesome. I played around with it myself, and I absolutely love using Screencastify to show how terrible my first iteration of the drawing was and how AutoDraw made it absolutely awesome. But we will get you guys out so that you can play around with AutoDraw yourself. We have a few resources that you might be interested in as you continue on with the rest of the week. First, I'm showing where you can get more information about this awesome strategy from the Fry Technology blog. They have a ton there, and they're really thought leaders on using this particular strategy. The other quick plug is we have Teacher of the Month this month. We are awarding 2 teachers with $500 in Donors Choose gift cards for Teacher Appreciation Week. So if you have not applied, that is an awesome way to take 5 minutes and get tons of money from the Screencastify team. And then the last thing is we would love for you to join us for our next webinar, which actually will be happening in the next couple of weeks. Specifically English teachers, we're having Heather Esposito lead a webinar that will be about reading fluency in Screencastify. So please make sure you sign up for that one. And next month, we'll be back with the Fry Technology team for an awesome webinar on parent communication. So make sure you follow both Fry Technology and Screencastify on Twitter for all of the newest information. And make sure that you tweet about the most awesome parts of these webinars and what you learned. Hopefully you learned something that is absolutely mind-changing that you are going to employ tomorrow.
Yeah, that really is our hope for you guys, that you go back and maybe it was something that you've already thought about, and maybe like sometimes don't you learn something and you think everybody else already knows this? Does that ever happen to you all?
Like every day of my life.
I know, me too. And then you talk to a friend who says, "Did you know that?" And you're like, No, I didn't know that. And why didn't you tell me that before? And that's what I always say. Why didn't you tell me that before now?
You sat next to me for 2 hours in this car and not told me this. Yeah.
Right. It just seems so wrong. So please share this with your colleagues. English teachers need this information. If they don't already know how to do this and are not already using this, trust me on this. Anytime you're saving an English teacher time grading, they need you to share that. So don't keep it to yourself. All right. Well, our blog post is, if it's not already live, it will be in a few minutes. Awesome. Okay. So our blog post is live. You can go to www.frytechnology.com or just fry.tech, and you will see that blog link there, and you can get the resources that we shared tonight, a video that shows you how to get started with Screencastify, if you haven't already installed it, haven't already done that. And I think that's all we have for tonight. Am I right, Neff?
I think you are correct. Everybody have a great night. Hope you guys have some amazing weather for the next few days. And we will see you in a few weeks and then back again in June.
Bye,
All
everybody.
right, cool. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.